So I have always hated golf and never been good at it. It's probably why I hate it.
This is Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
But there was a time in high school when I played a little bit more with buddies because I lived right next to a golf course. It was cheap. So we went golfing one day, and there's a guy that I played baseball with who was cocky as hell. I just wanted to beat him once in golf, and he'd always beat me. If I make a putt, I beat him. And he's like taunting me and everything else. So I forgot to add the fact that I didn't have my own golf clubs. I used my dad's clubs. So I putt and it comes up short. He starts laughing. I got pissed and I turned around and threw the golf club, the putter, and it wrapped around a light pole like this. They had night golf, and it just bent pretty much in half. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, that's my dad's golf club. So I run over, and all my buddies knew my dad, who's a total hard ass. They're like, you're dead, man. So they're like helping me straighten out the club, straighten it out. And we get it to its just close, as good as we can get it. But there's still a little tiny bend at the end. And nowadays, that would have been part of the design, but it was supposed to be a straight club. And I don't remember if I must have decided I wasn't going to tell my dad. So he didn't go golfing for a while. But then he announces he's going golfing with a bunch of buddies down to Hilton Head. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, I'm dead. So, so what happened was he went down a week ahead. And then we came the following week for a family vacation. So it's supposed to be a golf outing. There was some questionable stuff going on with my dad at the time. Like, for example, I got a phone call one time and a woman is sobbing to me on the phone. And I'm like, who is this? And she goes, Joe? And I'm like, no, this is Chris. Click, she hung up on me.
Oh, no. Oh, God.
So there was some questionable stuff going on. So we go down that first day and he's like, hey, Chris, you want to go out golfing? I'm like, here it is. He's going to freaking kill me on the golf course. So I'm like, sure. So we go. I rented clubs. He's using his. We come to the first green. He pulls out his putter and he goes, hey, what happened to my golf club? And I'm like, I don't know, Dad. I thought you were down here golfing all week. And he's like, oh, I was. Yeah. I wonder what happened to it. So all of a sudden I'm like, I'm out of it. Turns out my dad was not down there golfing.
Oh, no.
He was down there with somebody else who he might be married to now.
Oh,
and I got out of getting into a lot of trouble for fucking up my dad's putter. So that's my favorite experience with golf ever.
I'm with you. I do not like golf, but I hate watching it. Like, I think it's such a popular television sport, and I just can't stand watching golf.
Yeah, golf is, you said, it's like if you watch these golfers, they'll still shank it, and they've been playing forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like the chances that I'm going to shank it are like a million times more than that. And it's so frustrating. And I just never had the interest of dedicating, like you said, that much time
and money.
And money too. Yeah, exactly. And it's not that we're, I'm not trying to, it's just not the crowd that I like to hang out with either. It's just not something that I enjoy. No,
I'm sorry.
No, you're good, man. And I lived in Pinehurst for
right.
And to not play golf in that town, I didn't have a lot of friends, so it's fine with me.
I do have a golf story though that I'm going to slide in here because it's just my favorite golf story, and it's not I was playing in an outing, and I was in a foursome with, I think it was basically just 3 other guys from my firm, and the foursome ahead of us was 4 guys from my firm, and this is, Jesus, 20 years ago at least, probably 20 years ago. And one of our senior partners, one of the guys who hired me originally, he's hilarious. He's such a great guy. And there was a time where I think he played a lot of golf, and he wasn't great, but he was okay, and he could certainly hold his own in that kind of scenario. But as he got older, he just got more and more frustrated with golf, and he didn't want to put the time in and keep playing and what have you. So we're playing, and we play the front 9, and everybody stops and gets a hot dog, which is what you do at a golf outing. And, everybody's drinking beer as we go along. And so we get back on the course, and we've probably played 2 holes. So we probably have 7 holes left to go. And we approach the tee for that hole. And I look down, like right next to the tee box, near where the ball washing thing is. And there is a club with the butt end stuck into the ground. So it's sticking out kind of like a flag. And I was like, what the fuck is that? We're like, oh, somebody must have, that's a weird way to put your club down, but somebody obviously left the club. So we hit and we go and we get to the next hole. We finish the hole, we get to the next tee, and there's some water right next to the tee. And there's a fucking golf club floating in the water. And as we proceed, 2 more holes, every hole, there's a club. There's a club that's like up in the tree. And we finally catch up at a par 3. Everything kind of backs up a little bit. We catch up and we go up and my partner, Bill, I walk up to him. I'm like, did you see all those golf clubs that are there? Like they're strewn all over the course. He goes, yeah, those are my clubs. He says, I'm retiring. After every hole, he would just throw a club away on the course.
So which ultimately brings us to the episode topic. So we've had some funny stories about golf. Obviously, they bring us some entertainment. But this is about sports that we hate either to play or to watch. And that can be a variety of things of either we suck at it, like I do at golf, and then just don't enjoy the atmosphere, the culture, or they're boring as hell. Like I just finished PT, and the guy that the physical therapist was looking up at the TV, and he said, coming up on that horrible time of the year when there's hardly any sports going on. I'm like, yeah, that's my buddy's favorite time. That's Tom. When we were in college together, you'd always talk about this as being, I don't know what you call it, the dead zone or
Yes.
whatever, when no other sports exist except for baseball, which I never had a problem with, but you certainly did.
Yeah, for sure. It is true, although it's different now because there are so many sports that I didn't know anything about that are played in the summer, and like this year it'll be great because of the Olympics. So that changes everything, and it will be a great summer for sports. I think this year, but yeah, your typical non-Olympic year when we were back in college in the summer, it was baseball and it was golf, and I guess tennis. I mean, I know I think tennis was kind of played through at least the early summer, but I didn't like that either. I didn't like to watch it. And that's what these sports are for me. That just as spectator sports, I just have no desire to watch someone hit a golf ball. I respect the skill. I respect the hours, the tens of thousands of hours these guys put in. I think golfers are more athletic now than they were back when we were in college and high school. I still don't consider it a sport in the same sense that football or basketball or hockey is a sport, but it is a skill that I do not have. So I respect that, but it's just boring as shit. And when I hear people woo and awe about a golf shot, I'm like, yeah, I mean, great, I understand it, but he just hit it up in the air and then it came down. I mean, that's how it works, right? I definitely feel the same way about baseball. Again, I respect the athleticism, but watching a baseball game to me is worse than watching paint dry. And it still is. It was back then, which is why I used to complain. And it's the same way now.
Well, and you suck at baseball too. So
I do suck at baseball. I played 1 year, I think when I was 7 or 8. I don't think I realized at that age that, hey, if you were to practice, you might get better. And I hated it. I was terrible at it. I was stuck out in right field, as you might imagine, and couldn't catch, couldn't throw, had an awful time. The next summer, I found out about this kind of citywide track season that they had where you could run at these low-level meets, and if you did well, then you'd go to a regional and you could run at state. And it was for little kids. It wasn't like high school track or anything, but it was so much more fun to me. And of course, that was because I was better at it, and you didn't need quite as many skills to be able to run 100 meters.
And I had a different experience. I took to baseball right away. It was probably my more natural sport. I was a little smaller. And also, I grew up in Cincinnati, and there's a lot of things not to like about Cincinnati, but it's a great baseball town. And like when we would get straight A's, the reward was you'd get free tickets to a Reds game. So that was always a treat. And I would go at least a couple times a year with my dad. And I loved baseball. I was pretty decent at it. And I agree. I mean, nowadays, now that I'm older, I don't know many of the players anymore. I'll sit down and try to watch. And, we have some other sports listed where we differentiate between women's and men's. What's funny is, like, I work at Duke. I love Duke sports, Duke athletics. I would 100 times prefer watching a women's softball game over a men's baseball game for some reason. I don't know what it is. Like, it's just
There are certain sports that are
very
definitely that
similar
way.
type of, I mean, obviously the mechanics are all the same other than pitching underhand, bases being a little bit closer, but I find softball to be more exciting. Baseball just sometimes drags on. It's a game of subtleties, and sometimes those subtleties don't translate to TV or even in person. And there's other ways that you can not like a sport. Like, I would argue that basketball is one of the most exciting sports in the world because there's almost always something happening, the back and
Mhm.
forth. But I find basketball to be incredibly boring because, similar to you, I only played basketball for one season when I was a little kid, 7 or 8, can't remember.
Yeah.
And I remember being yelled at a lot for just like staring off into space because I wasn't watching the game. Like the kid in right field, like you were, who just
Yeah.
like, when do we
Yeah.
get a treat after the game? But I've never understood I understand the strategy. I just don't understand I said the word subtlety for baseball. I don't understand any of the subtleties. I don't know where to go if I don't have the ball, for example. And
Right.
I've never been good at basketball. So I enjoy college basketball. I don't enjoy watching an entire game. I like watching, the end if it ends up being a good game. But I really don't like the NBA. It seems a little too just one-on-one. And there's oftentimes, I think, in the NBA, you find that they don't really care until they get to the playoffs anyway, or at least that's the perception for me. So, and I know you're a
Yeah.
much bigger basketball fan.
Yeah. I would agree about the not really playing until you get closer to the playoffs, and that's just that's by virtue of the fact that the
Yeah,
owners want to make money, so there's a million games in the regular season, and
right.
obviously that's hard on players, and these days lots of times they don't even play in a lot of those games for that reason. But it is the sheer athleticism. I don't think there are better athletes in the world than professional basketball players. I don't care what sport you're talking about. Overall, when you measure a complete athlete, speed, strength, agility, balance, uh, quickness, all of those things, I think you're more likely to find the complete package in a reserve NBA player than you are in some starting NFL players, and it's definitely than baseball. I mean, I think baseball players are more athletic now than they were 20 years ago, and I think that training has changed significantly, but I also don't think it's my thing is my boys and I, we watch Sports Center just about every morning, and we're usually all leaving just after the top 10 list at the end of their broadcast. And as soon as summer comes around, it's nothing but fucking baseball, and it's nothing but diving catches.
Right.
Like, it's either a home run that is awesome if you can hit one, but boring to watch,
Yeah.
or it's we'll see, they'll say, and at number 6, and as soon as you see the camera on the outfield, one of us will go, we'll take bets on whether it's a diving catch or a catch at the wall, because those are the only two fucking things they ever do. And you're like, just the other day, there's a diving catch was number 1, and a fucking bicycle kick in a soccer game to score the winning goal was number 2. And I'm like, come on, give me a break. That's not true. I mean, everybody can dive and catch in the major leagues. I had a question
Speaking,
for you though.
oh, you're good.
So was your dad a baseball fan? That's too
Yeah,
bad.
he was a baseball fan and football, and those were the two big ones. I mean, we also put on there, like, even sports that you like. It's hard watching when you can tell that the quality is not the same, and I would argue that's XFL, USFL, UFL.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not a fan of summer football, and they
no,
keep trying.
yeah,
And I mean, and nobody is, right? Because if you ever watch a broadcast of, like, now that's the UFL, right? That's the
right.
new summer league. I think they merged USFL and whoever else was playing.
XFL, yeah.
XFL, that's right. And they never show the stands,
Mm-mm.
because why? Nobody's there. And that's their whole business model, I think, is, hey, this is a made for TV thing. We don't care if people are there.
Right,
But if people aren't showing up to watch it, it's obviously the product just isn't that good.
right.
And I don't think the ratings are any good. And God knows they've tried dozens of times since we were in college. maybe that's a little exaggeration, but at least 4 or 5 times there have
Oh
been
yeah,
leagues.
yeah.
Uh,
I think
um,
USFL's tried multiple times, XFL's tried a couple times, and now we got the UFL. So, and we also had NFL Europe. I mean,
oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
so there's been multiple attempts to try to get a year-round product for football, and it's tough because you can tell the quality of the NFL when you watch it, and then when
Yeah.
you're watching, it's like, and it's a big drop off. I feel like with baseball and the minor leagues and stuff, you sort of accept the fact that it's the minors and you pay less and all that other stuff. This just doesn't seem like it's the same thing because it's not. It'd be one thing to cheer for a guy. You're like, oh, that guy's going to be good. I can't wait till he makes it to my team. But you don't see a lot of these guys make it to the NFL.
No, you really don't. And I just, again, it just contributes to the desert of sports that I think most
Yeah.
summers are, because
Yep.
it's just yet another thing I don't want to watch on TV. What I think one of the funniest things, though, it kind of stepping back and looking at myself, and I think you're in the same boat, is the sport that in college, if you had asked us the sport we hated the most, I'm pretty sure we both would have said soccer.
With the caveat that our one of our brothers was the goalie for the soccer team, so we supported the hell out of him.
We did, and that team they made the finals. I think either our freshman or sophomore year they made the NCAA Division III finals.
Yep.
And as we went along in college, we ended up recruiting a number of soccer players. In fact, two other goalies,
Yep.
and then a couple other guys who I actually, a few of them I still am in contact with. Now they're a few years younger than us. So we like the guys, but boy, there was no way we would ever admit to liking soccer. And that was part of the, kind of the hazing process for those guys, is we would just tell them how bad their sport sucked. And it was, and in my case, it had a lot to do with jealousy because the soccer team was much better than the football team was back when I was in school. But I believed that I did not like soccer, and I just felt it was so boring. I felt it was more boring than baseball, which for me, even then, was saying a lot. And what's really funny in my case is now all I do is watch soccer because my boys did not play football. They've been playing soccer since they were 6. They're playing at a pretty decent high level here in Northern Illinois, which has great soccer. And they have forced me basically to watch Premier League and other professional soccer because they love it so much. And I've now come to appreciate the game to an extent that, my friends from school, the guys I played football with, make fun of me now because I'm such a big soccer fan. And I think you're in the same boat because I know at least one of your kids is a very good soccer player.
Yeah. My youngest son is actually, as we talk right now, he's still in France. He's attending an academy over there and has really accelerated his development and very much into European soccer and he's trying to find that balance between wanting to go to college and finding the right time to hopefully go pro. His goal, pun intended, is to become a professional soccer player. And I mean that's tough. You're talking
Yeah.
again the 1% or whatever the percentage is
Yeah.
for any sports, and soccer especially, because worldwide, you and I were talking about this the other day, like, and I don't have the numbers to back this up, but it seems that we're seeing more and more of the kids in the U.S. play soccer, which I think is taking away from, when I was a kid, it was baseball. I mean, it was certainly football too, but there was more to football. There was the violence, you had to buy the equipment, so baseball was a little more accessible, I felt, with Little League and everything else. But it seems to me, just as a quick snapshot, I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. The majority of our great players, young players right now, are from other countries. And I mean, they're fantastic athletes, different than what you said. These guys are amazing athletes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just don't feel that we're seeing the same pipeline from the U.S. They're still high quality, U.S. players, Mike Trout being an example, one of the best in baseball. Just seems to me, though, that soccer is starting to siphon off some of the better athletes.
I absolutely think that soccer has siphoned off athletes from football, for example.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of things because, of course, football has for the last 10 years and maybe a little bit more, there's a lot of safety concerns, concerns about concussions, concerns about CTE. So a lot of parents, even parents, even people we know that I played football with, they didn't necessarily let their kids play football because they were concerned about those. So you add that to the increasing popularity of soccer, and what you're seeing is kids that used to be, strong safeties and linebackers on the football team that are now out playing, center back on soccer teams, and you're getting better athletes, and the competition in terms of both quality of play and just the sheer numbers of kids that play. I mean, it's amazing to me. But my kids have got me into watching Premier League. My son Jake made the entire family join a fantasy soccer league. So I literally played fantasy soccer for the last 2 years, and of course Jake wins every year, and I get my ass kicked. But the one thing that I found in watching, particularly European soccer, that the games you end up with 1-1 ties and 0-0 ties, and that's not necessarily interesting, but the intricacies of the game and the way it flows is so different than American sports, particularly football, where you have a play, you stop, you reset, you have a play. And unfortunately on TV, that means you have a play, a commercial,
Right.
that kind of thing. Soccer, you watch a soccer game, there are no commercials because it never stops except for at halftime. And everything just continues to flow. And it takes a while. It's not a very American thing, I think. And I think it's becoming that way. But it's much more interesting to watch than I ever realized. And structurally speaking, the thing I really enjoy is the whole idea of promotion and relegation in professional
Yeah.
leagues, where if you're not in the top league, there's like 7, 8, 12 leagues below you. In England, I know there are at least like 12 leagues that are considered either pro or semi-pro. And if you finish in the top 2 of those leagues, you'll move up a league. And if you finish in the bottom 2 or 3 or whatever the numbers are, you'll drop down. So at the end of a season, you're not just playing for the championship. You don't see teams tanking necessarily like they do in Major League Baseball, in the NBA, or in the NFL. Because if you're at the bottom of that league, you got to fight to stay there, or you're going to drop down to a lower league, which means a whole lot of negative things for you in terms of money, fans, competition, everything else. And I find that very interesting. I think it makes the end of the season much more interesting to watch and makes more games mean things. And it would be cool. I think the only sport that's really well set up to do that right now would be baseball in the U.S., only because of the minor league system. But I think it would be really interesting if that were the case in the NBA or in the NFL to see relegation and promotion like that, just because I find it really, really fun to pay attention to.
All right, so that's a sport that we've grown to love. One that neither of us have, well, not one, the type of racing, like horse racing, auto racing. Funny movies about auto racing,
Yes.
but and I've tried. Like I actually joined. Speaking of fantasy, I joined a fantasy NASCAR league.
Is that right?
Yeah, for 2 years. Like I had a bunch of buddies that I've been playing fantasy football with for almost 25 years now, and they've gone into various other sports for fantasy. NASCAR was one. I came in dead last. I think I played 2 years. I was horrible at it. And I tried really hard to get into it. I just couldn't. I mean, it's just not. Again, like you were talking about earlier, I respect the skill. I'd love it'd be awesome to be able to go out there and drive like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
I'm just talking about auto racing, but it's just, I cannot get interested. And then I've tried some of the others, like I think on a previous episode, I talked about Senna, the
Yeah.
documentary, and the F1 series, which, at least they're turning different directions and
Right. Slightly more interesting.
yeah, slightly more interesting, but I still couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
And then horse racing, yeah, when they have the Triple Crown, it's fun to do little family bets and stuff like that. But that's the only time I care. And I'm so bad at gambling because I feel like horse racing is really just for gamblers.
Yeah.
And I'm so bad at gambling that it has zero interest to me.
Joliet actually has a huge racetrack that was a NASCAR racetrack that now no longer is. For years, for about 10 or 12 years, they hosted one of the races in the Cup, whatever the Cup was called. It used to be Winston Cup, and then it was something else. And it was, hundreds of thousands of people would come to the area, actually very close to where I lived, to watch those races. And I went to one once We got tickets from somebody, so we were on the infield. As with almost every sporting event, I'm sure it was my wife's connections that got us in. So it was kind of cool because there was there's all these campers in the infield, and there was, they were grilling food and you could eat food, and the campers would have like a stairway on the outside and you could go stand on the top. So it was kind of like a balcony view. So you could see pretty much the whole track all the way around. And it's really loud, and we were pretty close to the pits, and there's people everywhere. It's colorful and everybody's having a great time. And I got myself a drink and a hot dog or something. And I went up to the top because I was like, well, I'm going to watch this stuff. And then I spent about half an hour slowly turning in a circle to my left. And I didn't know who was in first. I couldn't tell who was at last. And it went on for hours, right? I was up there for a half hour, and all of us, we would just stand there and just rotate to our left. and I thought, this is ridiculous. And I went downstairs. I spent about a half hour. I went down. I found Dawn. I was like, I don't know how, because her family loves racing, and she's kind of a fan. I was like, I don't know how you can do this.
Yeah, I went as a kid. My dad took me to drag racing. I don't remember where I was a little kid. All I remember was holding my ears and crying. It was so loud.
So loud. And I've been to dirt track racing out west of us here. There's dirt track racing and it's all of that I just described, except it's a smaller track and it's filthy, because every time they come around a turn, it's just a huge, if it's dry out, it's just a huge cloud of fucking dirt and dust that then settles on the crowd. I mean, I don't know, man. I just don't get it. I just haven't gotten it. I feel frankly the same way about horse racing. Again, I don't know if you've been to any live horse racing. I've been, there's a track that is closed down now. In fact, it's what they're trying to sell to the Bears to put in a new stadium. And I've been up there, and it's so, like you said, it's built for gambling. That's all it is, because there's these long, long pauses while they set up a race, and then they run around the track one time, and they're moving faster than hell. And the jockeys are, I'm sure, amazing and athletic in order to do what they do. But you just watch horses, from my perspective, they just slowly go around the track, because it's a mile track. It takes them some time. And then they finish, and usually you can't figure out who won because it's close enough. And then it comes up on the TV screen, and people either clap or boo. And then, it's really just an excuse to gamble and drink. And I found it excruciatingly boring. It was really, really not something I'm interested in.
All right, which takes us to the last ones on our list. I find these to be interesting and I agree with them. Women's basketball and men's volleyball. And by naming that, we're almost differentiating from the other sports. So I agree with men's volleyball. Like, those guys are amazing athletes.
Yeah.
I just find it boring as hell. And I don't know.
Yeah, and it's well, I think the primary reason for me is that it's too fast.
Yeah.
And there's not much defense, because they're so powerful and so tall and jump through the roof that it's a pass, it's a set, and then the ball's going straight down. It feels like 90% of the time. It's so rare you see them be able to dig a ball, because they're hitting the ball 90 miles an hour. I mean, it's like humanly impossible to get to half of them. Yeah. And my wife, Dawn, played college volleyball. So I've watched, from that point kind of going forward, I've watched a lot more women's volleyball than I have men's anyway, at all kinds of different levels. But because there's not the same strength or height, it's a much more interesting sport to watch in my view, because there's more strategy, there's more defense, there's more ability to make plays, because the ball isn't going straight down 90 miles an hour. So I don't particularly enjoy watching men's volleyball, even though, as you said, I respect the hell out of them as athletes. And the very few times I've played, I've enjoyed it a lot. But when they're playing at the highest levels, it's really kind of boring to watch.
Yeah. And when you have those moments, it's sort of, I don't know why I always think of this statement from The Incredibles. It's like, when everyone's a superhero, no one is. Like, when everyone is just straight down, it gets boring. Whereas when you get those in women's volleyball, they're exciting because they don't happen every single time. So it actually stands out as a moment of excitement versus just the humdrum of a normal match.
I'm a big fan of an Incredibles reference, by the way. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's very good.
One of my favorites.
That's good.
And women's basketball is the other one. And I know that I feel like women's basketball is on the rise right now, and according to my logic, I should like women's basketball more because it seems to be a little bit more fundamentally sound. There's more passing, not everything's a dunk. And then everything going on with the rivalry between, I forget, Caitlin Clark and the woman
Reese.
from
Reese.
yeah,
Her last name is Reese.
yes. That's bringing some excitement to it. And I mean, you do have the powerhouse in South Carolina that's beating up on everyone. And
Yeah, when I was in college, I worked the stat crew, so I used to work men's games and women's games, and for 4 years, there was a group of us that basically worked together and did all the stats that whole time. And women's basketball at the college level and certainly at the professional level, it has progressed a ton since then. They are more athletic, they're better conditioned, they do run faster, jump higher, etc. But I think it's just still really such a ground game. The 3-point shot changed all of basketball, and that's Caitlin Clark's thing, right? She launches it from much further than I could hit consistently. But I enjoy, and it really just comes down to the athleticism of basketball. And it's different than volleyball, I think, because it's a bigger space. The problem with volleyball, I just went to a boys' high school volleyball game a couple weeks ago to see a friend of ours kid play. I forgot how small the court is.
yeah.
So again, when you have guys that can jump out of the gym, there's just nowhere to go. With basketball, even at the highest levels, the NBA levels, there's space. So you see plays develop, and you see, you get an opportunity to see them do interesting things with the ball. And women's basketball is much better, I think, than back when I really did not like watching it back when I was in college, but it still just doesn't have that same interest to me. It's as big as it is right now as a popular sport, primarily because of Caitlin Clark. I still have not watched the game. I haven't watched more than I watched the highlights on SportsCenter, and I haven't watched a pro game or a college game at all, and really don't have any plans to do so. I'm glad they're doing well. I think it's good for women's sports. I've got a daughter, you've got a daughter. It's great that they have more opportunities now, or the kids younger than them have opportunities to do this stuff. I hope it continues, but I just don't like it. I just don't. I still find it pretty boring.
And I do want to at least insert, it was Angel Reese, and I
Angel.
feel bad because there is a lot of talk that she's not getting as much of attention for a variety of reasons, and she's super talented as well. I just don't watch the sport enough that I only know the ones who are in the headlines, and right now it's Caitlin Clark. All righty, so that's going to bring us to our question of the week. Hold on 1 second. It's my job to pull that up. All right, we got a question from Jonathan writing in from Blue Ball, Pennsylvania. His question is, what is the most painful sporting event or events that you've attended involving your kids playing sports? I'm going to go real quick. I'll be short. So
sure.
I am remarried and have stepkids, and no offense to them, but easily the most painful events that I've attended are these weekend softball tournaments, ranging from ages, I don't know the ages, but the disparity in talent is incredible. I mean, games could be 15-14 and there's like one hit in the game because everything is a walk.
Oh God.
And you're just sitting there like, please throw a strike, please throw a strike. And it's always, I don't know who decided where to put these softball fields, but they're always in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. Yep. Like you're driving like 3 hours each way, and it's like, how the hell did they figure out where this place even was to put a softball field? I can only imagine it's cheap land, and then they put up the field, and they have tournaments, and maybe make it back. But it's more so just North Carolina is a hot state, so you're playing, in the summer, it's brutal. You're looking for any bit of shade. Everyone's got a tent and your chairs. I mean, it's an ordeal to pack up for those things. And then to go and, there were good teams that my stepdaughters played on, but they'd often play against just some terrible, it's just like, just not fun, not competitive. And everyone's a winner too, because what happens is, even if you lose every game, you go into, so what they have is they have pool play, where you play, and then they seed you into the tournament. Well, there's a gold bracket where you actually win. There's a silver bracket. And if there's a big tournament, there's a bronze bracket. So even if you're one of the worst teams, you get a trophy because you beat all the other bad teams. So a lot of stuff that I don't like about it. go to support and not criticizing the kids playing. It's just more the overall experience for a variety of reasons. That's mine.
Yeah, mine. Trying to think about this question and come up with an answer. I have to say, and I'm not sure this really counts as an answer to the question, only because I don't know that it's necessarily really a sport, but they set it up so much like a sport that I think it's a fair response, and that's dance.
Hmm.
Anna, when she was little, starting at about 4 or 5 years old until probably 7, took dance lessons. And they didn't call them competitions, but they would have these things in auditoriums where everybody came out and they would score them. It was, it was like gymnastics or whatever. So people would win or lose. And there is nothing more excruciating than sitting in an auditorium packed with people, by the way, and watching your own kid, let alone everybody else's kid, who's 5 years old, dancing poorly and just, doing the steps. And I just always found it horrible. And the problem is for those events, you were stuck. Like, you would sit down and you'd have a program, so you'd know when your kid was dancing. And, if you're lucky, in Anna's case, she would usually be like in 2 things, maybe 3, but usually like 2 things. And invariably one of them was at the beginning and one of them was at the end. And there's an hour and a half of shit in between, but you couldn't get up. It was rude to get up. And I think that was the non-sport part of it. But it's just, the auditorium's filled with dance moms who there's just all this fake applause, and it just was horrible to watch. I just hated it. And she discovered figure skating because she also took skating lessons at that time, and she found out about figure skating because they were advertising at the rink one day when she was skating, and they had a video up of the ice show. So these girls skating with sparkly dresses, and it caught her, and then she skated for the next like 12, 13 years, something like that, and loved it. And figure skating isn't all that different than dance in that regard. But for whatever reason, if you're in the rink up in the stands watching your kid skate and she does her solo program and skates off the ice, it's okay to leave after that. You can get up and walk out of the rink and go get a cup of coffee or whatever it is, and nobody looks at you funny. Like, I think that's the difference between skating really being, not necessarily a sport, but certainly an athletic endeavor, as opposed to dance, which was more like theater or something. So it was rude to walk out of the theater in the middle of a dance competition, but in skating, it was okay just to watch your own kid and then leave. So I think that change in itself made me very happy that she moved from dance to figure skating.
Plus, figure skating is cooler. It's in the Olympics and everything.
Yeah. I learned to appreciate figure skating. It's not something that I liked before she skated, and my problem with figure skating, which is kind of the same problem I have with gymnastics as athletic endeavors, is because of the subjective nature of the scoring. I'm a bigger fan of sports where there's a score. You can look up at the scoreboard and whether you're winning or losing. Anna would have these events where I thought she was awesome and she would finish third. And there were times where I thought she looked horrible and she would finish first. And I have no idea what the distinction was between them. Yeah. And that was always tough for me, but she loved it. And it was definitely better than going to any kind of dance recital ever.
Which brings us to the core of the show, which is our recommendations. So for those who are listening the first time, we have recommendations from what we call then. So anything prior to the year 2000. So roughly looking back at when we were in school together and the time right after that. And then now, and that's anything 2000 into the present day. And we try to pick things that aren't overly obvious. It can be any sort of cultural event, movie, book, song, album, play, I suppose. Been waiting for the first time that we pick a play. So that has not happened yet. So for our recommendations for then, I'm going to go first because I never saw yours, even though I know that movie. I'm intrigued to hear more about it. It sounds like a good choice. All right, so my choice from then, and a lot of this show is to torture Tom. Like, I know how much Tom hates baseball, And I would argue that of all the great baseball movies, Eight Men Out would probably be one of the hardest for Tom to watch, because it's a serious treatment of the 1919 Chicago Black Sox, a dominant baseball team that's been accused of throwing the World Series against my beloved Cincinnati Reds. The Reds still get credit for winning that World Series, whether they deserve to or not. Some great acting. John Cusack's in it. D.B. Sweeney, Charlie Sheen's in it. David Strathairn. Probably the piece that I want to emphasize the most is it's directed by John Sayles, and I really like his movies. There's a seriousness to them. There's a willingness to be a little bit more on the edge for certain things. Like Men with Guns is one of my favorite movies that he did. We'll talk about that one at another time. But what I really like about Eight Men Out, other than the acting, is it does a really nice job of not making the players the bad guys. I mean, it's, Shoeless Joe Jackson has never made the Hall of Fame because of his role in this. And the real bad guys, as it has often been throughout a lot of sports, and that's going to be another theme for my now recommendation, are the owners and the people who are really making the money off this. And the players had a very little choice in what they could and couldn't do. And again, you can say all you want, their livelihood is playing a sport, but it's still their livelihood, and they didn't have a lot of control over what they were paid, how much they had to put into, and all that other stuff. And gambling was, an influence back then as well. And some folks approached these players about making a little extra money is really what it was about. And a couple of them apparently, took the offer up. But what I like though is even the conflict on the field, the guys who wanted to win so bad, it didn't matter how poorly the owners treated them. It's still a game that they want to win, a championship that they want to be able to have as part of their legacy. And some of the fights on the field, not literal fights, but, guys like, what's going on? What do you. So I really like just the overall treatment of it. It's a fascinating period in baseball's history. Still think the Reds would have won even if they hadn't thrown it, but that's neither here nor there. But it's really about the acting. I'm going to give it 5 out of 5. It's one of my favorite baseball movies. I think it's a true masterpiece, and I would argue it's not overly exciting at all times. So in many ways, it mirrors the sport of baseball. And I think that was part of John Sayles' intention in how he directed it.
Yeah, I have seen that movie. I watched it once, probably relatively close to its release. It's got a great cast, and I think it's a fine movie. Again, I would much rather watch Eight Men Out than watch an actual baseball game every time, 10 out of 10. I do recall, and again, it's been a long time, I do recall feeling, though, that it was slow moving.
Yep.
There were some really dramatic moments involved, particularly, confrontations of Shoeless Joe and that kind of stuff. And I agree. First of all, I do agree about Sayles. I think he's a great director. I don't know that I've ever come up with my top 5 list of baseball movies. It's probably not on it, but I think it was really, I don't remember whether it won awards or not, but I remember it being critically acclaimed. Like, people did like that movie. Critics really thought it was a good movie. My recommendation for then is from 1998, also a film, a comedy. The movie is Basketball. It was directed by David Zucker, who I think he did all like the Airplane movies or was involved with them. I think, I can't remember, but it was, oddly enough, it was not written by these guys, but it starred Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And it is an obnoxious, kind of obscene, ridiculous, silly movie. And it was intended to be such. And that's what Zucker was always known for. And of course, this was after South Park had already, I think, become, famous. Not too long, though, after that, because Trey Parker and Matt Stone have been doing that show, South Park, for what, almost 30 years now, I think. But they act in this one, and I think it was a favor to the writer of the film, and I don't recall who that was. The reason that I'm recommending it is because, from my point of view, this was a movie made by people who hate sports. Because it's supposed to be, I think, satirical. I think it's supposed to be pointing out just how ridiculous, particularly professional sports are. There's lots of stuff about sponsors. There's lots of stuff about changing the rules so that more people watch it, regardless of how it affects the game. It's basically about these two knuckleheads who were not athletes and, couldn't succeed athletically, hanging out with their buddies, playing basketball or whatever else it might be. So they invented their own sport in their driveway. And the movie is about how they basically made it famous and it became a TV sport. And then the rich guys were moved in to take over the sport. And interspersed with all that is just the most sophomoric, ridiculous humor and jokes. Lots of sight gags, lots of sexual innuendo, and it's a ridiculous movie. But I love the fact that it was basically made by people who clearly don't like sports in general and hate baseball. That's what comes through from the movie. It's funny. And the only reason I thought of it was because it has recently become one of my daughter's favorite movies to watch. She has a basketball poster that actually she asked for it for Christmas. She wanted a basketball poster to put on in their apartment at college because I guess she and her friends watch it on a loop and they think it's the funniest thing that they've ever seen. I don't know what to make of that. But I know my daughter in particular is a big South Park fan and a big fan of pretty much everything those two guys do. So I think they just dug back like we always used to do and found this like classic movie that, from their point of view, this classic comedy that very few people watch or want to see. But it was not critically acclaimed. It was panned, I think, by everybody. And I can remember the first time I watched it thinking, this is awful. I will never watch this again. And then I did watch it, probably 30 years later, with my daughter when she came home for the holidays last year. And my opinion didn't really change that much. They are funny guys. There's some funny jokes. I give it 2 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream just because I am kind of a fan of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, but there's better work by them to be done. But I do think it fits in pretty well with this idea of sports that you hate.
And for those who have problems with short-term memory like I do, if you forgot our recommendations, you can always go check them out on our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. They'll all be up there. We're going to try to put all of our recommendations from season 3, including the ratings. You can scroll down on the page a little bit and see our 5 out of 5 recommendations from the previous season. All right, so that brings us to our recommendation for the now, and I'm also going to go first because I can't believe you're going to recommend a baseball movie.
Okay, fair enough. Let's hear what yours is.
All right, so I took inspiration from you, even to the point that I didn't completely finish the book, but I plowed through what I would argue is a really, really good book. It's nominally about football, and I love football. You love football.
Yep.
But there's a lot of talk in there about why, particularly North Carolina, but also some of the ACC became more of a basketball-centric area conference than some of the others. Were in the South. You got the SEC, which is a powerhouse in football, and I'll get to that in one second. But the book is Fight Songs, A Story of Love and Sports in a Complicated South, written by Ed Southern. He's a journalist, has written quite a few books. The main theme of this, just to cut to it real quick, is he went to Wake Forest, grew up in Winston-Salem, huge Wake Forest fan, and talks about all his difficulties because Wake Forest has never really been a powerhouse in any sport, particularly football. He married an Alabama fan, and just some interesting observations. Like he walked through, go to Alabama games with his wife. He'd wear Alabama stuff. And he talks about the fact that like if he went to a big time football program, there's no way in the world he'd ever wear an Alabama sweatshirt. But since he went to Wake Forest to, support his wife. Also talks about how like as he's walking through, like everyone's going Roll Tide, and then they see him if he's got his shirt or his hat on. Not quite the same thing for Wake Forest. And he's very, very proud of Wake Forest. There's some great lines in there in the book. One of them, real quick, and I am going to read a quote. There's more about football, but I was so surprised by it that I wanted to read it. But he's talking about the transfer portal, and how it might benefit some of the smaller schools. This book is really recently written, so 2023, and how some of the 4-star athletes might decide not to go to Alabama, where they'd be, a small fish among, many, or big fish among many big fish, and might go to some of the smaller schools where they can stand out. Said some football fan account tweeted in July, name, image, and likeness could benefit some of the smaller schools in recruiting. It's better financially for a 4-star recruit to go to Alabama and not stick it out, or to go to Wake Forest and be the guy. He's basically saying, is it better for them? So the author's line is, can we get an amen and some more 4-star recruits for Wake Forest? So he's funny about that. But the line that I wanted to read, so the book is powerful also for its discussion about race and exploitation of all the way back to slavery, and of exploitation of poor folks who can't afford to go to college, which has often been equated with Blacks who have not had as many opportunities. So it's not a glorious picture of college's response and how they've adopted big time sports at all. But I did want to quote this line, and then I'll quickly cut to the chase about why I picked it. So he's talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. And he said, and someone summed it up perfectly. So here's the line. There has to be a shift in the way of thinking. Rational must outweigh irrational. Justice must outweigh injustice. Love must outweigh hate. If you put yourself in someone else's shoes and you don't like how it feels, that's when you know things need to change. So that's the quote. The author writes, so who wrote that? Who put such great, generous, all-American thoughts into such clear, clean words? Some governor or congressperson? Some minister or public intellectual? No. That came from Clemson's 20-year-old quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. I hate Trevor Lawrence. That's a great, great quote.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I
Wow. That's a huge surprise.
Yes, I now have new admiration for him. All right. So
wow, that's incredible.
I don't like basketball. At one point I lived in Pinehurst, surrounded by all these people that love golf. I don't like golf. I'm now in Chapel Hill, surrounded by all these people that love basketball. I mean, you go to a middle school basketball game around here and it is packed, like standing room only. It's just voracious appetite for basketball. And there's some really, really great athletes around here. I saw a kid who's one of the top recruits in the country just the other day. He's going to UNC next year. He played at the local high school. It's cool. And I got a little starstruck. I'm like, damn, that kid's going to go to UNC next year.
Yeah.
I still hate basketball. I don't appreciate it. But he talked about why North Carolina became a basketball state. And he said, basically, name any other state where there are 4 big time programs so close to each other: UNC, NC State, Duke, and Wake Forest. Yeah. And you can argue the merits of Wake Forest, but they've had some really strong basketball programs. He's talking about just the numbers. So if you're recruiting top athletes, think about how many football players you need to recruit. So we're not talking today,
right.
like
when
you can recruit from any part of the world, really. Back in the day, it was more about recruiting locally or maybe adjoining states. But if these 4 programs are all recruiting for the same athletes, it's a lot easier to fill up a basketball program than it is a football program. So that's his argument, is that's the direction they went. And I never, ever thought about that. And I like to think that I think about things like that. And this is one that escaped me. But it makes so much sense. There aren't, we talk all the time that UNC and Duke are 8 miles apart. That enhances the rivalry. It's cool. But if you think about how they're competing for the same athletes, and UNC, Duke, and NC State, and I would argue Wake Forest, have never had a sustained excellent program in football. They've had their years, and then they drop off, or their coach goes somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So just interesting. And I skirted the issue a little bit because it's really a book about football. Right. But there was enough analysis in there, and there's some great political discussion for those who are interested. I would recommend the book. I would give it 4 out of 5. It's really close to a 5 out of 5, but it's easily a 4 out of 5. Egg Burritos a Sour Cream. Really good read.
All right. Well, my recommendation for now, post 2000, is again a film. It is, as you pointed out, a baseball movie. It's the movie Moneyball from 2011, directed by Bennett Miller. It starred Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. and I'm just going to read from what I typed in the outline because I think this explains everything. Not only is this movie about baseball, but it's about the business side of baseball. So they took the sport that I enjoy the least and made a film about the most boring part of it to me. And I love this movie. I can't explain why I love it. I will say there's very little baseball in it. But there's just a lot of two guys in an office talking on a phone, which shouldn't be exciting, shouldn't be interesting. But I really find it to be a good movie. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. As a result of that, I think Jonah Hill's fantastic in this movie. Brad Pitt he's consistently good in my opinion, but he does a good job of playing kind of this rogue baseball executive that came up with a very statistical based approach to picking up players and getting rid of players who were high paid but didn't produce in the categories that they wanted them to produce, and then basically getting guys kind of on the cheap but who were good at the statistics, that good at the production that they wanted out of them, which was basically, and you may remember better than me, but it was like base hits, like but it was all so. In some ways, I think it what this guy did, because this is based on a true story. In some ways, I think it may have ruined some sports because everything is so statistically based now.
Yep.
That I find that I don't know. It's bothersome to me for some reason. I can't really explain why, other than they just breaking everything down to a formula. But the movie is very, very interesting to me, and it's moving in a lot of ways. And this Brad Pitt's character was on his last legs, and he got criticized greatly for everything he was doing, both inside and outside of the organization. And then his team went on a winning streak and proved that everything he was doing, at least for that season, was the right thing to do. So I do recommend it, even though it's about baseball and even though it's about business, two of the things I like probably the least. But it's really well done.
I have never seen that movie, so I've never seen either of your movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That shocks me. I just I would have guessed, and of course we don't talk about this much ahead of time, other than maybe jotting down something in the outline. But you should watch that movie. I do think you would really like it. Like I said, you're not going to see a lot of baseball action because, in fact, I think a lot of the baseball is actual footage. I think they show footage from the games, the big games that they're talking about, the games at the end of the season when they're either riding this winning streak. But I do think you would like it. I think you'd like it a lot.
But thank you. 2 movies I get to seek out. I should have actually watched Moneyball by now.
Yeah, basketball. I'm not. You could, you got a free afternoon with absolutely nothing left to do. Maybe you watch basketball, but I would say that I do think you would like Moneyball.
All right. So that takes us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's right. I would think we were just going to say the same thing. We are now ready for post facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
This is where we correct mistakes, flesh out information that we didn't have at the time when we were rambling in our prior episodes, and it gives us a chance to get caught up and give everybody updates on stuff we've already talked about.
And I will start out this week's post facto. As soon as I said it, I knew that I had done what I did. So my playlist song last week was What It Means by Drive Truckers. I stand by that. Great song, tied in with a key lyric to our theme last week. But when I was describing how good the song is, I indicated that it had a variety of criticisms of society, and one of them was anti-science. And that's actually not in that song. It's in another of my favorite Drive-By Trucker songs, Thoughts and Prayers. That song is very pointed at the hypocrisy of politics, especially our response to school shootings and mass killings. And basically the only thing we offer up are thoughts and prayers. But in there is reference to anti-science politicians. I often get those 2 songs, or I consider those 2 songs as sort of paired. They're very, very political songs by the Truckers. They have others that are, but those are 2 of my favorites. And I just happened to reference, gave a little bit too much credit to What It Means. But if you like that song, go ahead and check out Thoughts and Prayers as well.
Yeah, they're on two different albums, right?
Yeah,
Or
they
are
are.
they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's it. I haven't had one in a long time, and I had to have a close
You-
background.
sometimes you have to revel in a mistake because it
Yeah.
happens so seldom. I have two things I wanted to point out. One is could not be more minor, I think, but I was hemming and hawing. I couldn't remember who Ed Hamill, Ed's Not Dead, was opening up for on the live album, which was called Hamill Comes Alive. He was opening up for the artist Annie DeFranco. I don't know. It's not much of a mistake, but I could not remember who he was opening up for, so I thought I should at least point that out. Maybe more importantly, I was talking about Louis C.K. as an artist that he was basically Me Too'd. He did a lot of shitty stuff, and as a result, I haven't really listened to his comedy or watched his stuff in some time. But I didn't really have a good sense of what his professional history was in terms of TV that he had done. He did. I think what I said when I was talking about his show Louie was that it ran for like a short season or maybe 2 short seasons. I was actually wrong. It was on for 5 seasons from 2010 to 2015. It was critically acclaimed at the time, and it did fairly well. So it wasn't as short-lived as I said. There was a prior series he did that I think was on HBO called Lucky Louie that was only 1 season, and I think I was just conflating the two of them. Which takes us to our playlist picks. We generally speaking, each pick a song a piece to add to our Third Song in Season 3 playlist that relates to the theme of the episode. And this episode, I will lead off and recommend the song Rain Delay by Marat. Marat is a Philly band. They're frankly one of my favorite lesser known bands. Not a lot of people know about them. They're very much kind of a rock and roll band. They're not, my typical Americana, No Depression type band. They are funny. They are raucous. I've seen them live a couple times. Love them. Love to see them perform. From what I believe may have been their debut album, which was called Let's Cut the Crap and Hook Up Later On Tonight, one of my favorite titles. They did a song called Rain Delay. And the reason I'm recommending it is because there is a solid, 30-second intro to that song, which is done by the Phillies play-by-play announcer. I don't think he's still there. I think he may have retired at this point. But at that point, he was a long-time announcer for them. His name is Harry Callis. And it basically starts out sounding like he's just describing the beginning of a Philadelphia Phillies game, but it's raining, so they're in the rain delay. But then he begins to describe the band who was there to sing the national anthem, which was Marat. And he describes how they won't leave the field and they keep singing. And then they break into their song. It's not nearly my favorite song by Marat, but I love the baseball reference to it. They're clearly fans of the Phillies and baseball in general. And I think it'll be a good addition to the playlist.
All right. I am throwing a curveball at you.
You son of a bitch.
Pun intended. So I really was going to torture Tom as much as possible with my choice. I will mention it. I will pull a Tom and mention my second choice, which was Are You Ready by the band Disturbed. And the album, it's from the 2018 album Evolution. And the reason I was going to pick it, it's hard rock. The guy's got a hard rock voice. But it is, if I ever make it to the major leagues, so I had rotator cuff surgery. I have a better chance now as I'm healing. But it would be my walk-up song.
Yes, I see.
So it's a great walk-up song. However, I'm going to change my pick and go with one that's a fantastically catchy song. It's a little raunchy, but since we talked about horse racing, I'm going with Kenny Fiedler's Barrel Racer Land, which I have put on some of our mixes before. I totally threw a curveball at Tom here.
Yeah.
I think it was only released as a single. It is, it's raunchy. So a lot of double entendres about how the racers interact with the horses and stuff like that. But it's a really fun song. So I think it'll be a good addition to the playlist. Hopefully it's not too offensive. He does mostly, I think he's Canadian. He does mostly cowboy and horse racing type of songs. All of his albums have that sort of design to them. And like one of my other favorite songs of his is a song called Cowboy Shit, which is funny as well.
That song is great. I was having trouble placing who you were talking about.
Yeah.
That song I know you put on a playlist, and I love that song.
Yeah, and Barrel Racer Land was one that I ended one of our playlists on, and we moved on. So it'll be closer to the start of this playlist. Maybe it'll turn some folks on to Kenny Fiedler. I do like the stuff that I do like. It gets a little too much for me with all the cowboy stuff. But he is joining the third song in season 3 playlist.
Yep, and that playlist, we will post we have already posted the third song in season 3 playlist on Amazon Music, on Apple Music, on Spotify, and on YouTube Music. And by the time you listen to this, it should already be posted on any of those platforms. So please listen to the songs and let us know what you think. Which then takes us basically to our closing. I would ask that you follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, rate and review us, give us all the stars you can. Listen, as I said, to our playlists on the various music streaming services. If you can rate them or share them, please do it. We'd like to get other people to listen to the podcast, listen to what we have to say. But more importantly, get in touch with us. Let us know what you think about either this episode, the podcast in general, etc.
We'd also ask you to email us with any suggestions or feedback or criticisms or complaints or questions. So if you have anything, if you'd like to displace Jonathan as our question asker, go ahead and send us a question. We'll get that one in for you. Our email address is thirdsongin@gmail.com. All right, go.
All right. You've been listening to Third Song In with Tom Polachek and Chris Derrickson. Thanks for listening. You have been listening to Third Song. Nope, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
What happened to us?
I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. I do know that somehow we've managed to create stingers because I was literally thinking earlier on, we haven't said anything funny here at all. And I stand by that, but we do sound ridiculous. So that usually works pretty well. Are we still talking to each other, or has this all been a fucking nightmare? And now it's back. That's really weird. Are you fucking with me? I think you're fucking with me.
I can't stop laughing, so I can't fuck with you. I got it.
All right. Yeah, you were supposed to do it in the first place.
Whatever. Always find a way to blame me, fucker. All right.
It says CD right there. CD. Email us at.
No, I'm not even looking at. I closed that damn thing. How do you expect me to follow it?
That explains a lot.